Right, I'll get started anyway, and then there's a few more people that are waiting to join us, and hopefully they'll be with us in the next couple of minutes. There we go. Brilliant. Right, good morning, everyone. My name is Shelina Begum. I'm the editor for the Business Desk and your chair for our next session, which is exploring a sustainable transport solution for Yorkshire. As we know, transport is going to be at the heart of driving the green revolution and will play a huge role in the economy reaching net zero. The government has already announced its focus on a fully decarbonised transport strategy, which should help to improve people's health, create better places to live and travel in, and drive clean economic growth. Coronavirus has also changed the way we see our world and has provided a unique opportunity to rethink the way that we travel, to speed up the development of clean technologies and to put green recovery at the heart of transport plans for the future. Today's panel will look at how new solutions, whether that's electric vehicles to active travel strategies, can create a sustainable transport solution for the region. We've got an excellent lineup of speakers today. We also have a Q&A button on the right-hand side of your screen, so please do ask any questions and I'll try my best to put them to the panel. So I want to just ask the panelists to introduce themselves first. I'll start with you, Sarah.
Thank you, Shelina. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name's Sarah Storey, and I am the Active Travel Commissioner for the Sheffield City Region's Mayoral Combined Authority. I've also been working as a policy advocate with British Cycling, and I'm a mum of two and still racing cyclist, hoping to go to Tokyo in a couple of months.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. And Owain?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Owain Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Wizz UK, particularly for Yorkshire. Exciting news for us is that we'll be starting our operations again from Doncaster, Sheffield in just over a week. But more broadly in the context of aviation, obviously a focus for sustainability. So very happy to be here today to share our views and have some good discussions.
Thanks, Owain. Can I come to Emma?
Good morning. So my name's Emma Brigginshaw. I'm the Sustainability Manager for London North Eastern Railway. We've been managing to run a reduced service, albeit for the last few months whilst the COVID pandemic has been ongoing, and equally really happy to be here to talk about how rail can form part of the sustainable transport solution going forward.
I'll hop in while Shelina's rejoining and pass over to Jenny. Good morning, everyone. I'm Georgia Yexley, so I'm Head of Cities at TIER. We operate the e-scooter and e-bike service in York currently and have just yesterday been announced as one of 3 operators to run the e-scooter service in London, where I'm sitting right now. I've been working in micromobility for quite some time internationally, and very much excited to look at what we can do to bring more of that to York. I'll pass over to you, Jenny.
I'm Jenny Holmes. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategic Transport at the Sheffield City Region Mayoral Combined Authority, led by Dan Jarvis, and I work closely with Dame Sarah on active travel and all other modes of transport in South Yorkshire.
Sorry, disappeared there for a second. Here you guys. Right, thanks for the introduction. I want to start off with you, Emma. So LNER has been ramping up its efforts to achieve net zero carbon by 2045. What does a sustainable strategy look like for you guys, and what does that mean for Yorkshire and the local communities in the region?
So yeah, rail decarbonisation is something that's really high up on the agenda for the whole industry. And in particular for us as the transport, the operators of the trains, that means looking at how we can reduce the emissions of those trains that get you from A to B, from down in King's Cross all the way to Edinburgh and Inverness and Aberdeen in our case. What that looks like is a great deal of collaboration, actually, and understanding the interdependencies across the whole industry. So as the train operators, we need to understand our control and influence, and then that will help you identify the opportunities that you have to make meaningful improvements and meaningful change. So for us, that involves looking at where we can make energy efficiencies to reduce our energy consumption, full stop. So reduce the demand as far as possible. That also means looking at how we procure our energy and where it comes from. So we are a very energy intensive organisation. We're not going to be able to get away from the fact that those trains use a lot of energy to get people from A to B. So we need to be smart in where that energy comes from. And that also relates to our non-traction. So if I divide the business in between traction and non-traction, so that's the trains, which is traction, and non-traction, which is everything else. We need to look at both of those things and assess those opportunities. So with regards to non-traction, we look at our stations, what energy our stations use. Can we procure that more responsibly? So looking at renewables, or can we change completely in terms of the type of energy we use? So if we've got gas central heating at the moment, how do we start to phase that out so we can remove the need to burn fossil fuels completely and move more towards electricity, which in terms of grid decarbonisation makes it a much more less carbon intensive form of energy to use. And that also applies to the trains as well. So in December 2019, we saw the last of our all diesel trains leave our service. We are now fully either electric or electric and diesel bi-mode, which is a great step in the right direction, but we don't want to stop there because there's still a diesel element associated with that travel. And that means looking for new technology to how we can phase out the diesel generator units to an alternative replacement. For us, in terms of the research that's been done by the rail industry, that's looking like a battery storage option, because although hydrogen is a really exciting alternative, our trains move at 125 miles an hour. So we need an energy source that will still enable us to do that. So we're looking at our energy sources, the type of energy we use and how we procure it. But then going back to that collaboration point, also establishing where the opportunities for collaboration lie with the infrastructure operator. So Network Rail, who actually own the network, that's the rails, that's the wires, is understanding their timescales for things like electrification and how then that feeds into our plans for our own decarbonisation as well. In terms of what that means for Yorkshire, we pass through Yorkshire, we go all the way, like I said, from King's Cross to Edinburgh and up to Inverness and Aberdeen. And that absolutely means we can become central to a lot of journeys, whether that's leisure travel or business travel. Whilst recognising that we are not the entirety of people's journeys, we can form a large part of those journeys that people make, covering the majority of the distance. And we absolutely just want to be part of people's ability to travel long distances up and down the country in a sustainable manner as possible. I think Shelina's frozen or gone to sleep. I'm not sure which. And I was talking for quite a long time there, Shelina. Apologies if I sent you to sleep.
Oh, no. Can you hear me? Okay. Right, that's great. And
so while Selena's coming back to us, I can see a comment's just appeared in the chat from Andrew about collaboration with other transport networks. Absolutely, Andrew, that's something we're looking at as well in terms of train stations as a transport hub and realising the opportunities to connect with other forms of either public transport or even those opportunities for sort of micro mobility connections and leading into Georgia and her company and what they do. And looking for those opportunities to really act as that hub for lots of different transport options. So we've got that first and last mile connectivity as well.
I can certainly add to that thought process as well, Emma, in terms of the connection of multiple transport types. I think it's spot on in terms of them being hubs. Oh, look, we've got Shelina back, so I don't want to take us in another direction if you had a
sorry, I missed that. I want to ask you a question. You might have already started talking about it. So you guys have been trialing the e-scooter, and it seems to be quite a big hit so far, and 50 e-bikes as well. Just tell us about that journey and trying to get people on board with that idea. I think this is what we need across cities across the UK, not just in Yorkshire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I can talk a little bit about how it's been performing and going in York so far. So, of course, in the e-scooters, I think we talked somewhat separately about the e-scooters and e-bikes, although combining the two vehicle types is a really important aspect of how we're approaching the service in York, in serving different riders, different trip types that you're being able to reach through different vehicles, right? But starting with the e-scooters, this is part of a national trial that's taking place, so highly regulated by the Department for Transport. Number of operators have the ability, and a select number of local authorities have the ability to participate in that, York being one of those participants and Tier. So we introduced the e-scooters back in October. We've since had 23,000 rides from around 7,000 riders. There's still much room to grow on that, but the adoption has been fantastic. I think a lot of that is around the awareness around sustainability, and sustainability in transport is consistently growing, particularly from the kind of Gen Z market as well, who are really thinking about how their commute or their trips actually contribute to negative environmental impact. I don't think we're at critical mass yet. There's still a lot of time to bring more people into that and understand how they can bring benefit, especially with the e-scooters. E-vehicles in general can be met with some skepticism from the public, and understandably, especially so from community groups that maybe have access barriers or are vulnerable road users. So it's really important for us to also consider and work with them in how we bring these services about. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was going to say, how's the pandemic on the use of the e-scooters?
Without doubt, the pandemic has had a real influence on the way that people choose to travel. I think, as we went into stay at home and not moving around as much, all transport had some effect from that. People weren't moving around in the same way. But as we have started to progress towards the recovery, e-vehicles and active travel offer a safe, socially distant, sustainable method to get around. And people are actually adopting them at a far greater rate as the return to work is happening. They offer a really valuable opportunity for people's return to work in safe ways, especially where they're considering that environmental impact and that consciousness is changing. There's a lot of rhetoric around a green recovery. I think as well, Emma started talking about the creation of mobility hubs and how we connect from one form of transport to another. There are a few aspects of the Tier service that are very relevant for the green recovery that we're hopefully entering, and particularly around creating mobility hubs and access through our Tier energy network, which I can definitely share a lot more on, that we're hoping to kind of install those hubs into some train stations or high street stores where riders can go and swap batteries and then get a free trip. So that's improving access. It's also improving the sustainability of our service by reducing down the amount of operations that we do on street, and it's enabling those kind of trip chaining journeys as well. So we're definitely seeing people's habits and thought process and how they travel changing drastically because of the pandemic. But we've also seen a huge amount of negative impact, and I think it would be remiss to not acknowledge the negative impact of the pandemic on people's access to work and education and all sorts that has happened. So I think an interesting space to talk about. And plenty to say on how active travel, sustainable travel plays a role in that.
Yeah, and I know it's being trialled in York at the moment, but do you see yourselves going out across other parts of Yorkshire?
Absolutely. We are very keen to engage with more local authorities around the e-scooter trials. You may have seen that we've just been announced as one of the operators for London, of course not Yorkshire, but we're certainly growing our footprint in the UK. We've also introduced the e-bikes. I touched on this, a really important aspect of our service, that we are catering to different types of riders and trips. So we're certainly very keen to also deliver the e-bike services across the UK, but either in combination or one or the other, depending on what suits that city environment. And I think that's the key factor of making sure that you're actually tailoring the service to what's needed in the region. So it's always kind of starting at that position, understanding what the transport needs are or transport gaps are, or ability that we have to create impact at a city level is first, and then building the right type of service to meet that need.
Thanks, Georgia. Talking about active travel, I'll move on to you. So you've been doing quite a lot of work in the Sheffield City region, and one of them is around active. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how it's going to create better connected routes for walking, running, and cycling as well?
Yeah, thank you, Shelina. I think one of the first points to talk about is the need across the country, probably across the world, to reduce the total number of vehicles that we have on our roads. The number of vehicles that have been bought and are driven has gone up exponentially over the past decade, and each decade we get millions of more vehicles onto our roads. So ultimately, we don't have any more space. Building more capacity on the roads just attracts more vehicles. So we have to find a way, and at the heart of that is to make it easier for people to make their short journeys on foot or by bike. So the first place to start is where people live and their day-to-day activities. And active neighbourhoods are often called 20-minute neighbourhoods. So it's where someone can walk or cycle and within a 20-minute radius of their house get all the goods and services and activities that they need to live. So whether that's education, whether that's the local shops, and we know from figures that are out that the local high streets have recovered well during the pandemic, or as we ease off from the pandemic and restrictions, because people have got into the habit of shopping more locally, and certainly some of the behavioural changes from lockdown one were very much focused on staying local, shopping local, supporting that local high street. So this all ties into that, and being able to access your dentist, your doctor, your library, all of the things that make day-to-day life much more pleasurable, sports centres, that kind of thing, recreational activities within that 20 minutes means that there's less need for people to have, 1, 2, 3, 4 cars even. And in neighbourhoods where people don't have driveways, obviously cars are parked on the street, and quite often, unfortunately, parked on pavements. And that makes it incredibly difficult for residents who don't have access to a vehicle or who have a mobility challenge to get around. So by creating active neighbourhoods and those 20-minute neighbourhoods, we reduce the demand for vehicles. And then by building that into a wider opportunity for better public transport systems, we enable people to make those longer journeys on public transport. So as Emma was talking about, those longer journeys on the train, because we have connectivity and those railway stations become like a transport hub. And so first and last mile is on foot or by bike, connecting into those transport hubs for those longer journeys by rail, or even utilising the bus services as well for more local mid-range journeys. And recent research has shown that around 2/3 of journeys are 5 miles or less, which with the technology of e-bikes or even e-scooters, you have that chance to enable people to travel safely and effectively without the need for vehicles. So active neighbourhoods are that central point for driving down demand on vehicle ownership. And by doing that, we can connect the neighbourhoods. If you think about them as being little cells with the main routes going between those cells, and you have safe crossing points across those main routes, then people can traverse active neighbourhoods by those safe crossings across the more strategic routes, and they can actually go longer journeys using active means as well. And by doing that, you're building activity back into people's days, but you're also making it more convenient, and people don't have to worry about, is there enough places to park when I get there? Is it going to take me longer? Because the active route is the direct route. And if you do need to take a vehicle because you've got equipment or something like that, you would go the longer route round, because you're obviously, not propelled by your own energy.
Yeah, and I guess you touched on the pandemic having an impact on this. People were doing a lot more walking, and I guess with people working from home as well, that's going to have a big impact on the active more people will be wanting to use that route?
No, without a doubt. And I think some of the recent research from the BBC shows that some of the things people anticipate doing more of as the restrictions ease is they're more likely to work from home. They anticipate walking more. They anticipate taking more journeys on their bike because it's something that they took to during, lockdown. I mean, lockdown 1, we saw traffic levels drop to levels not seen since the 1950s. And when we do remove vehicles, people feel safe enough to come out and venture out without their vehicle. And it's a catch-22. The more vehicles you have, the more other people need a vehicle because they don't feel safe because everyone else is in a vehicle. And as we know, vehicles are getting bigger. People are having huge SUVs in urban situations, which are completely unnecessary in many ways. It's about providing those suitable alternatives, because whilst you might feel safer in your big vehicle, that means everyone else needs to feel safer as well. So it's trying to find those ways to enable people to make the choice to leave the vehicle behind. And we've seen a change in the vehicle ownership. So the amount of people, the trend is downwards towards less vehicles. And there's something around 25% of people have reduced the number of vehicles in their household during the course of the pandemic because their travel needs have changed, and they're probably working from home a little bit more, traveling a little bit less for work, but also they've found things in their neighborhoods that they weren't aware of because previously people were sort of living in isolated bubbles and didn't really necessarily integrate into the community. And all this time at home has given people an opportunity to realize that actually where they live is really nice. And they've found things, they've found ginnels, they've found parks, they've found green spaces that they hadn't anticipated being there because they just assumed they lived in an urban environment where it was all streets and houses.
I guess the issue with this is that the affordability aspect of it, because it's making travel affordable for people to be able to do that now. It's not something they might have considered earlier on.
It certainly is. It's one of the big questions about how active travel kind of blends into and supports the resurgence of public transport, and having a public transport system that's connected, goes where people need it to go in the most direct way, and is also affordable is very, very important. And so many people have the aspiration of wanting to own a car. And in South Yorkshire, a third of people don't have access to a car or don't have the financial means to get a car. And people are, saving and going without food or heating in order to be able to run a car because they see that as their only way to access employment, education and other opportunities. So active transport, providing people with access to a bike and making that affordable is so much more affordable than trying to help somebody purchase a vehicle and keep the running costs of that vehicle low. So it does make sure that the most isolated people in society, the people who have the least means, then are able to access more and have better opportunity, and that ultimately will enable social mobility. So active transport really is a discussion point around social justice as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And we'll just move on to Owain of Wizz Air. I mean, you guys are the greenest in Europe. And, you've also got your own sustainability targets to meet. I mean, aviation is an industry, it's got its own challenges. Not everybody sees it as a sustainable industry, but it's trying to make headways in that area. I mean, what are you guys doing to make it a bit more greener, to make it more sustainable, and, and how you are addressing those sort of climate change concerns?
I think if we just look back at the year we've just been through, people have certainly taken a step back and asked themselves about aviation. I mean, if I think back to the month of April 2020, where I live at home with my family in South Wales, we're used to seeing aircraft flying to and fro, going across to the Atlantic, and for a month we saw nothing, and people didn't even question whether they should be travelling anywhere. And I remember the excitement actually when we saw the first aeroplane flying overhead. It was people were pointing it out. It was quite a seminal moment. And within 2 months of that, what we saw were large numbers of people wanting to fly again. Now, where we're coming from, we are, unlike the railways, for example, we're not in an electric industry. That goes without saying. We are still burning carbon fuels. But I think the good thing, if we're looking at the sustainability aspect, is that what is good for business is also good for sustainability. So what we want to do is to move the discussion on from flying being inherently a bad thing. It's not. Flying has huge benefits for communities. Direct connectivity brings prosperity. It drives economic growth. But the discussion has to move on to how can we fly, how can we provide that connectivity in a way which becomes more sustainable. And that's what we're focused on. Now, where Wizz is starting from, as I say, there's a happy marriage between what is good for business. So, burning as little of those fossil fuels immediately today as we're looking as really the only option. That's good for business because it's a more profitable way of operating. That's why we have a policy of refreshing our fleet every 8 years, with the youngest fleet in Europe, 5 years old, and we are significantly the lowest carbon emitter. Now, that's not to say that there's not work to be done. There is, and we're already committed to reducing our own carbon footprint at Wizz by 25 to 30% by 2030. Now, there are various ways you can go about that. One of which is, as I say, making sure you have the best equipment, the most fuel-efficient equipment. But there's no silver bullet in the way that there might be an easy switch over to electric power or hydrogen power. These are huge technological challenges, and the airlines can't deliver that on their own. There's a systemic change needed here. And we need to be working together with regulators, with industries, with the manufacturers, with governments to find a way, to ensure we get that connectivity preserved in a sustainable way for the future. Immediately, we need consumers to be able to make choices. Now, the airlines have been brought within the carbon budget, as we know recently. But very much the focus there is a stick. It's punishing people for flying. It's imposing taxes. It's making it more expensive to provide what we think is a very important thing for the community, which is being able to travel abroad for connectivity between countries, let's say, driving that economic growth. The key thing for us now is to look at ways that you should be incentivized. Now, let's say, educated choice. I can quite happily point to our own current sustainability record, our own emissions record, and compare myself with another airline. The way that the government is currently looking at it is that I should be treated the same as an airline with maybe 20-year-old, 30-year-old aircraft, spewing out 2, 3, 4 times the emission levels as Wizz. I don't think that's the right way forward. We need to be looking at the people who are investing, who are doing what they can at the moment, say, bringing in the best technology, making sure that you are driving down emissions as far as possible, whether it's that technology or the way you operate. So they're changing the way you operate, whether it's flapless approaches or the single engine taxi out using electric tugs at airports. There are companies who are investing in that and companies which aren't. And I think it's unfair for all companies to be treated the same. That said, as I say, there is a need for us to be able to become part of a sustainable system. And so that depends not just on the airlines, it's the industry and governments, but also working with everybody else on here. Providing that point-to-point service is a far more efficient way of somebody having a transfer flight, for example, flying from a regional airport to a hub and out again. You're having twice the heavily emissions phase of flight there in terms of takeoffs. So working with people to promote, I think, the regional aviation is important. Working with other transport providers, other transport mode providers, and there are various comments on here, looking at how you can get people to the airport sustainably. But by enabling people to travel locally, I think that's already part of the battle. People aren't going to travel as far in maybe less sustainable ways to get to their flights. So for us, there's a lot of challenge ahead in terms of getting on board the step change technology. In the short term, we focus on our business, which is being as profitable as possible, using the best equipment, giving the customers choice, using carbon offsetting, which is, again, it's a short-term measure. Ultimately, we need to be looking forward to how we can actually drive systemic change, which means you don't have to be having offsetting. You're actually providing a more sustainable technology to start with.
2 points you made. One was, you are investing in your fleet, and one of them is the NEO aircraft. Is that a bit of a game changer for you guys?
Relatively speaking, compared to other aircraft fleets, yes, that is, and in the context of current technology, best there is. We have 250 of these aircraft on order. So within the next 5-6 years, we will be transforming ourselves to an entirely neo fleet. We're going to be driving down our emissions that way. The fuel burn, for example, it's a minimum 16% increase. There's a huge also associated NOx emissions reduction, and even environmentally noise reduction. So yeah, we have we are Airbus's largest customer bar none now. And I say this is key to our business. That takes me back to the very start, that sustainability goals, if you're running your business properly as an airline, these two things actually do go, I wouldn't say hand in hand comfortably, but there's almost an aligned objective. We want to drive our fuel consumption down. That goes very well hand in hand with a sustainability objective to drive down our emissions.
Thanks, Owain. That's really interesting. I'm going to just quickly move on to Jenny. As this is an area that you're very passionate about, and lots of developments happening in the region. Could you just tell us some of the stuff that's happening in Sheffield City and the impact that's having on the local communities?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll start by sort of talking a little bit about how we've gone about thinking about sustainability, I suppose. We have a transport strategy which is to 2040, and like most mayoral combined authorities, we try and think long term. So we've got the 2040 plan. We're place-based, so we're representing our local constituent local authorities, and we try and be integrated. So some of the things that Owain was mentioning, we're trying to sort of balance the need to grow economically with our sustainability goals and our social impacts that we want to have. So we've got adopted our transport strategy. We then have modal implementations plans that sit beneath that operationalise our goals, and I think. Much as what's been sort of said already, these plans have within them our targets for how we want to achieve our net zero goals, our sustainability goals, whether that's particular modal mixes that we want to encourage, so particularly encouraging active travel and public transport, and our decarbonisation plans, particularly, we're very keen to see electrification of the rail system of the Sheffield Midland line, for example. And then we're obviously taking forward lots and lots of schemes across the city region as well. And Dame Sarah has been championing our Transforming Cities programme. So this is a £166 million investment, in half of which is active travel, half of which is public transport over the next, still got another 2 years of that. But that will invest in cycling and walking infrastructure across South Yorkshire. So people will be starting to see in their daily lives the change in their kind of built environment, the change in the options that they've got available to them. So hopefully people will start to see that change happening over the next couple of years. We've also, I think, over the last year or so, seen some really quite radical plans from government in terms of policy. So both in terms of the active travel policies that came out last year and the national bus strategy this year, it's really kind of creating a really interesting conversation about how we allocate road space in our places. So, what portion of road space should go to cars? What should be public transport, how we marry up public transport with active travel demands, but then also to George's kind of area of work. Where does the new world of micromobility, for example, sit within this? How do we plan in new modes as well? So I think it's a very live debate in terms of local transport authorities thinking through some of these things. We've also got increasing amounts of funding coming to us from national government to start implementation over the next few years as well. So £5 billion announced by government for active travel and bus, and another sort of £4 billion for mayoral combined authorities to help integrate all of this transport in the city region over the next 5 years as well. So absolutely should be transferring from the policy world into what people experience in day-to-day life in the next couple of years.
And is it happening fast enough for you?
I think it certainly can't happen fast enough, because you'll have seen Tracy Brabin, the new West Yorkshire mayor, meeting with Dan Jarvis, our mayor, earlier on this week, and their commitment to work together on rail was very much a commitment to get on transport, was to get our system into the 21st century. So it feels like there's been a history of underinvestment in Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, so there's a catch up that's definitely happening, but certainly that's going to accelerate over the next couple of years with the investment that's been promised by national government.
Yeah, and The bus system is a system that you guys are really looking into as well, possibly a London-style system, a bit like what Manchester's trying to do. Is that something that's high on the agenda for your region?
So it's certainly high on the agenda in that pre-pandemic, Clive Betts MP was asked by Dan Jarvis, our Metro Mayor, to undertake an independent review of the bus system, and the findings really were of a sort of spiral of decline really for bus. So the patronage numbers declining year on year. The amount of investment in bus had decreased by 50% in 10 years. So those two things are obviously related, but a range of other factors driving the fact that people just are not choosing to use bus, coupled with the fact that our economic geography has changed over the last 10 and 15 years. You know, people don't necessarily work in the centre of cities, they don't necessarily work 9 to 5, and we haven't got a bus system that reflects the new world that we live in. So I think the government is asking us to commit at the moment to an enhanced partnership model, which is a different operator model, an arrangement with our operators. So that will be put to our mayoral combined authority to agree to progress in June. We then leave other options on the table. You know, we will test out and see whether that enhanced partnership model does give us the benefits that we'd want to see as the first step, and then we will consider, you know, in future years whether there are other models that might work or different models for different parts of the city region, for example.
And can I just touch on as well, you know, electric vehicles? I mean, what are the plans for, you know, having vehicles in Sheffield City region? You know, do you have enough charging points? Is that something that you guys are planning for in the future?
Yeah, so again, I think we need to catch up on the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We've been given about £2 million, I think, this year to spend. So we'll be starting on that. Again, people should be able to see those benefits, you know, coming within the year. But absolutely, we need to scale that effort up considerably over the next few years to give people choice, to give people assurance that the infrastructure is going to be there, but also aligned to that to do the same for our public transport infrastructure as well, so that, you know, operators can shift to that way of working too.
Yeah, thanks. I'll come back to
not having much luck with the technical elements of this meet, are we? I think we've lost 2 panelists and
our chairwoman.
Looks like it.
While we wait, though, I think there's been some really good conversation in the chat. Oh, Shelina, are you back?
So yeah, so I was just asking about, you know, the demand from consumers. Are you seeing, you know, lots more people wanting to see that change, or are we not people not the sustainability?
I think in terms of consumers, I will go back to Dame Sarah's points earlier and George's points about what happened during the COVID period. It showed really that when people feel safe, they will choose active travel modes. So it's really about enabling people to make those choices, because people will do. We know from cities around the world that you know, if you put in high quality public transport infrastructure and high quality active travel infrastructure, people will make that choice.
And are you seeing, you know, a demand from, you know, consumers wanting to see that change? Is that having a big impact on your sort of model and on what you guys are planning for the future?
Our customer insight is quite interesting in terms of feedback when we ask customers these questions, because there is the expectation that businesses just do it in terms of being environmentally responsible and reducing carbon emissions. So actually we're finding that in terms of priorities, our environmental credentials are about number 3 on the list, behind cost and punctuality. So we're seeing customers, I think the last stat was something about 57% of customers would choose a lower carbon form of transport deliberately. but the majority of customers are saying that it should just be so. Businesses should take responsibility for this to enable the customer to make that responsible decision without having to put too much thought into it themselves, I think. And cost and punctuality is front and centre for the majority of customers that we see. I don't know if that is in part to the fact that we don't communicate well enough in terms of the benefits of travelling by rail. I think that's something which we are starting to explore more, and sharing more information just to help people make those more informed choices if they weren't aware of the effect of their decision making in that respect.
Yeah. And I guess the whole affordability aspect comes into sustainability is about access and affordability, and are the challenges around that in trying to keep your costs at a certain level while trying to still get people to come and use your services?
I'll put my hands up and say I'm not really qualified to answer that question with regards to cost and affordability on rail, so I wouldn't like to comment about that. Sorry.
No worries. And I think everybody's raised this point about collaboration and making sure that everybody's working together and working towards. Sarah and George, I mean, you guys are collaborating with different parts of the city. Do you feel that's key to doing the work that you guys are?
Again, absolutely key. I think to the point around what customers want to see, I think first framing for a micromobility company like TIER, our customers aren't only our end riders, they're also the city, and where something like your sustainable practices or your environmental policy or having an EMP in place were once differentiators for the business, they're now really requirements to be able to operate at a city level and have the opportunity to bring your service. So I think we're seeing that shift things on that zone. But in terms of partnership, absolutely really necessary. For TIER, we have around 30 public transport integrations. Just in terms of the app experience and being able to kind of work from, for example, using the LNER app and then arriving in a TIER city and being able to continue your journey in a sustainable way. That side of things, absolutely really vital, but also around the TIER energy network and the physical experience of our service. That partnership, again, really important. Enabling our riders, again, on the access point to be able to access the service through discounted methods or free methods by participating in it, or even driving foot traffic to businesses or locations that might have suffered throughout the pandemic. These partnerships are really vital to actually achieving the end goals of why you introduce sustainable transport methods into a city, of reducing down carbon impact, increasing access to employment, access to education. You're thinking about those goals. You're thinking about reducing the reliance on private cars, reducing the amount of private cars in enabling these services. So that ultimately does require a really joined up approach in getting there.
Yeah, and certainly our joined up approach works with all the different agendas across the mayoral combined authority. So we have a positive impact on the recovery of local economy, and we're working with a local economic partnership to enable more businesses to choose to be active travel enabled and to encourage and sort of be proactive in enabling a workforce to be active travel enabled, because it's not just about a person deciding that this is my responsibility. Workplaces also have a role to play. Are there different benefits that the companies can provide for people? So instead of access to a company car, is there not possibility of access to a bicycle instead, or an access to some other more sustainable means? And also working across things like with the Environment Agency to enable them to create what they need to. Obviously, South Yorkshire has been plagued with the flooding, but that also how that works across from the west where we have the hills. I think it's west all the way across to the east, and what we can do across that then leads into tourism, so that we can enable people to arrive in South Yorkshire and not need to utilise their vehicle at all. They come by train and then they arrive and they can access what they need to. They can see the beautiful countryside. So we do collaborate across all, and I talk about active travel as being kind of the biscuit base of society. We are the first thing you do in a morning, and we'd like you to walk further than just getting into your vehicle. We'd like you to be able to take those short journeys and those longer journeys in collaboration with the public transport system, so that we can reduce those total number of vehicles on the roads. But our partner authorities, and we have 4 with Barnsley, Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield, kind of working across what is needed in each of those urban centres. And the topography obviously varies across the region as well. So we're here to create those solutions, talk about best practice, and enable the politicians and the elected members to make the right choices for their populations, and to enable them to work in conjunction with the health service and in conjunction with all the other public services to provide a solution. And active travel can be a very strong solution to so many of the challenges that we're facing.
Sarah, well, that's all we've got time for now, and thank you to all our panelists today. Lots of interesting discussions around trains, planes, and automobiles and e-scooters. Now, ideally, ideally, we'd like to use, walk to town, get to the next place you want to get to, jump on the train and get to the port, and then use Wizz to get to your other destination. Yes, so lots of interesting points. Please stay on for the next session, and thank you for joining.